Just sitting here today, kind of chilly outside. We got quite a bit of rain. It's still got a lot of snow left on the ground, but it's starting to melt away now. And I just sitting out here on our swing and watching me and Daisy and the kitties are watching the granddaughter. She's playing in the rainwater. She loves to play with the kitties and Daisy. So I was just sitting here and reminiscing and watching her. She's having a good time. And just thought I'd share a Bigfoot encounter that was sent to me from a lady here. She's from Minnesota. I won't give out too many details, just to kind of keep her identity and stuff private. It was kind of an anonymous conversation, but she's from south part of Minnesota. And when she was a small girl, her and her dad and her brother, they grew up on a farm, a dairy farm, which a lot of local country Minnesotans are dairy farmers. And if you've ever been on a dairy farm or familiar with cows, they usually milk them sometimes twice a day, and they're Holstein, so they're the big white and black cows. Well, they had one with its calf that had kind of wandered out in the pasture with the rest of the cows, but for whatever reason, it did not come back in with the rest of the herd when it was time to feed them and do the second milking. So her dad, and her brother, they decided that they would hike out into the pasture and go find out what was going on and bring her back in so she could eat and be milked. So they, in the process of going out there, it was a early spring or mid-spring day, kind of I'm assuming kind of similar to what we have here now. Probably less snow, but I'm guessing they had a little bit of snow on the ground and stuff. And they were just walking along, and the younger brother, he was just chatty Cathy, talking to the dad about whatever, hunting, fishing, cows, whatever young boys talk about in them days. Anyhow, they fought on their way to get the cow. The sister or the young girl, this was back in the 60s, so I'm guessing she would have been probably around 10 or so age-wise. Just so happened to look up on the bluff rocky hillside for the river there, and they're from the river valley. So if you're familiar with that, it's a very hilly, rocky area. A lot of thick forest, and a beautiful river, and can be kind of remote. Can be some distances between farms and stuff like that. But anyhow, when she looked up, she had noticed that there was a fallen tree that she had seen many times before, being out in the pasture and stuff. But on this particular occasion, she noticed a strange shape kind of laying amongst the tree. And I believe, if I understood her right, it had its back up against the main part of the tree and was kind of somewhat concealed by the falling part. And she stared for a few minutes, and she said it kind of reminded her of what a cat would look like cleaning itself. She said she couldn't tell for sure, but it almost seemed like it was grooming. And then she watched it for a while as they continued to walk along to get the cow and the calf, and it all of a sudden, it must have realized that they were there, or for whatever reason, it kind of stood up, and it was large. She said it was bipedal, kind of like a really large man. She kind of described it as like, and they were a bit of a distance away, so size and stuff, it might not be 100% accurate, but she did seem to think it was pretty large, a larger individual, and it was all white, which is very odd. But anyhow, it just seemed to crouch down and then kind of stand up, and then it kind of blended with that tree, and it went up into the bluff side and disappeared out of view. And she was a little kind of hesitant to tell her dad and her brother because she thought they'd make fun of her, and she thought she might have been just seeing something, but she knew she saw something. So anyhow, they got the cow and the calf and walked it back up to the barn and fed them and did their milking. And after dinner, she was in a big hurry. She wanted to see the WCCO news, And so she told her mom she was going to go watch the news, and she was all excited. And she was hoping that she was going to hear on the news that a polar bear or something had maybe escaped from the zoo, and that's what she saw. And she'd be kind of like a hero, I guess, if she, was the person that found that bear and seen it and everything. So that would have been pretty cool. But they never made any mention of it. There was nothing. So she kind of put it on the back of her mind, I guess. She knew she'd seen something, but it wasn't an escaped animal. And she said the rest of her life growing up there, and she still lives there to this day in that area. And she said she's never really been quite sure what exactly was it that she seen that day. And she said it didn't really scare her, but it made her kind of curious. It was one of those things like when you see a bear or a wolf or something in the woods for the first time, you're not really scared per se, but you're like in bewilderment. You're like, wow. It's almost like a spiritual experience. You just kind of take it in, and you don't say much. You're not really sure quite what you're seeing. But anyhow, I've been giving it a lot of thought and mulling it over, because she asked me what my thoughts were. The granddaughter's yelling for me. Yes? What? You did? No, baby something poo. Okay, I'll come clean it. You just make sure she's okay. Yeah, who is okay? Okay, it's okay. I will get it. I'll take care of it. Give me a moment here, Stinkweed. So anyhow, baby girl, Daisy May, are you getting into trouble? But anyhow, Daisy May. So I gave it a lot of thought, and you can't rule out albino deer, possibly an albino bear, or an albino moose for that matter. Though all those things are incredibly rare in and of themselves, other than the deer, the bear and the moose are incredibly rare for that part of the country. But you can't rule it out, because they just reported just this last year that they had several moose sightings down in that area. And after talking to some of the locals from down there, they do periodically encounter moose, and I believe they've actually had black bears down there before. So you can't rule any of that out. And the other thing that could possibly be is a wolf. But none of these things would describe something that stood up, except for maybe the bear. And oddly enough, bears can walk on their hind legs for a little bit of a distance, so they can appear like they're walking. So I'm not really sure exactly what it could have been, but I got to thinking, albino animals are incredibly rare. Now, we have had a few albino deer here, and I have seen pictures of albino black bears and albino moose, but they're not here in Minnesota. But I got to thinking, the one thing it could possibly be, and of course, the one possible, you can't rule out that it was a Bigfoot per se, but the other thing you got to consider is something that goes on here in Minnesota. Is I got to thinking about it, and this has really been puzzling me, but it could have been a coyote hunter, and they do dress in all white camouflage and would tuck themselves into a fallen tree for cover, because coyotes are incredibly smart. They're probably one of the hardest animals to hunt of any of them. And you try to call them in, and you got to stay concealed. If they even see the slightest hint of movement, they're gone. And if they even think that something's awry, they're gone. And to shoot or to hunt them, you have to get them in pretty close. They're so quick and jumpy, you wouldn't think that they were, but they are pretty quick and jumpy, so you have to get them in a little bit closer to get a good bead on them, get a good shot. The reason that made me think of that is I used to hunt when I was a kid, a teen back in Illinois, but I haven't hunted in quite a while. Used to have some great friends. We used to love to go hunting. It was a great experience. It was like being out in God's world, God's country. It was just a beautiful experience just to sit there and listen and see all the sights, smells, and things that you've seen while you're waiting on the deer to come by. But and raccoons and raccoon hunting and stuff like that was pretty popular too. But I turned to photography. So I go out in the woods, I do a lot of photography. And I'm a pretty big fella. And I'm a big fella, and I was out trying to record coyotes one day. So I sat down and I tucked myself into a fallen down tree with my camera, and I wasn't wearing any camouflage or anything, just had on my regular clothes, and set my tripod up, tucked it into the tree, got everything all set up, and then I used my call, and I was trying to call them in, and hopefully my hopes were to get one to come into the edge of the woods. And I was in the woods, and I thought if I could get them to the edge, they wouldn't see me and I could get a good shot. So anyhow, I spent quite a bit of time doing that, and 2 hunters happened to appear in the woods. It really wasn't supposed to be anybody in there, but 2 hunters showed up and walked right past me. They could have reached out and hit me with a stick. They got so close, and they didn't even know I was there. And they walked around and were hunting, and I figured they ruined my shot. So, and no animals, coyotes or anything, or deer or anything, were going to come in there since they came in. So I real quietly packed up my tripod and got all my shit together and started to hike out. And I crept past them because I didn't want them to know I was there. So but I crept past them. I didn't want to alert anybody, but they didn't even notice I was in there. And I walked right past them and walked right on out. I say that for a couple of reasons. The one is coyote hunting is pretty popular, and you do conceal yourself, and people don't notice you, and the movements are really slim. The other reason I bring that up is it goes to show that a big person, i.e. a big Bigfoot type thing, could literally walk around in the woods right by you, and you wouldn't even know it was there unless you were specifically really looking. And mind you, these guys were hunting and didn't even know I was there. And I didn't even have camouflage on. I was just ducking behind trees and stuff. So it goes to show you that it's possible. Why couldn't a Bigfoot hear us in the woods and hide long before we even get there? Anyhow, in conclusion, I have to say that people that say, and I'm not saying one way or the other whether or not there is a Bigfoot or anything like that, but for people to say that it's impossible is not really listening to all the evidence out there and the personal accounts and stuff like that. I do believe with all these people hunting and all the trail cams and all that stuff and all the development out in the country that people should be seeing it somewhere, but it doesn't rule it out. I've been plenty of times out in the woods hunting or hiking and camping and didn't want to be bothered. I was out there by myself just to enjoy the nature, and I would encounter other people and they would never know I was even there, and I'd walk right by them, and just subtle movements, quiet. And the average person, even people that are out hunting, don't really notice everything right next to them. It's if you spend a lot of time out in the woods, you'll know what I'm talking about. But anyhow, there's nothing saying that some creature couldn't hear you slamming your car door, getting your gear out of your vehicle, walking through the leaves, the brush. You make a lot of noise when you're moving around, even when you don't think that you are. Maybe you're talking with your friend, whatever. It's possible that this animal is hyper vigilant. There's been a lot of times I've been hiking, and I'm in bear country, and I very rarely ever encounter a bear. I have on occasion encountered them with their cubs and stuff, but it's a real rare occurrence. So it is possible. So I don't know what she saw that day. It could be a Bigfoot.